Hey folks, welcome to the Pass Priority Podcast, a podcast where we talk about competitive Commander from a different perspective. I'm your host, Greg, and today I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts, Zach and Evan.
What's up,
Hello.
everyone? I'm ZClan7, also known as Evan.
And I am Zach. I also go by Disco Breaker in most servers and social medias.
Yeah, and today we're going to be talking about, we're going to be comparing titans of the format, and we're going to be looking at Brian Koval's winning Blue Farm list from Okotober and Bryant Cook's RogSi list. You know, and Blue Farm and RogSi, some of the most powerful decks in the format right now, both widely considered tier 0. And what do we think about just like the decks? Because Blue Farm is a perfect example of mid-range that's very adaptive. It can win on turn 2, but it also has the grind potential to take over a more controlling role of the pod and slow down and really just hammer out that card advantage. You know, compared to RogSi, where it's just like traditionally a very turbo deck. It just wants to win turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and if it can't win then, it wants to just have as much gas as possible to just win whenever it gets the opportunity to.
Yeah, I think both of these decks are fully utilizing what most cEDH players know is like the Grixis core set of cards. It's roughly probably 75 cards. You could probably flex in some in and out of that list. But really the two main differences in this deck you'll see in about the remaining 24 cards or so, which we can actually take a look at here. We have in our little notes here. I put up a side-by-side comparison of like the cards that are different in each list. Just starting right off the bat, we see that one of the lists is quite a bit longer than the other. That's because I've taken out all of like the normal lands that don't have any like special effects to the deck. So obviously we're not going to care about Scrubland being in Blue Farm and not in RogSi. So
Yeah, and before
we already look 24 versus 28 lands. Big difference.
Before we take too close of a look at that, I know me personally, and I know you guys too, also have a lot of experience playing against these decks. If not playing them, then playing against them. And there is a very defining difference when you play against a Rog-rak deck that I never thought about before playing against it. All these random ass cards that just make your deck so impactful because you have this free creature in the command zone, right? What was it? I think it was the Mox Amber that made me really mad the first time it was played on me. I'm like, he just gets Mox Ruby in his deck. All right, and I got to play these bad cards.
Yeah, like decks aren't supposed to always have Deflecting Swat or Fierce Guardianship online on turn 1 every game. That's just kind of absurd. It really just pushes these types of cards that are supposed to have like some drawback or some additional cost that revolves around being like having a commander in play or just having a creature in play in general. Like all of those types of things are usually baked into these mana costs, and the fact that you just have this access to this free creature in play always really changes the power level of these cards in this specific shell, and the deck is just leaning into as many of those effects that it makes sense to.
Yeah, cheating mana cost is good, apparently.
Yep. So as we mentioned here, the main one that you noted here is Mox Amber. You have sort of the set from like Commander, whichever Commander set they were, with the Fierce Guardianship, Deflecting Swat, all those free spells that if you have your Commander in play. But some other less common ones that you might see, like Paradise Mantle, Springleaf Drum, Moon Snare prototype. All of these allow you to get to that extra mana the following turn. It makes your turn 2 that much more consistent to have that critical number of 5 mana or more.
Yeah, let's think about this for a second. So in whatever the number is for average mana production in a cEDH deck, Rog-rak just basically for free in the deck gets access to 5 or 6 more pieces of this. And what that means is just these explosive starts that usually result in a wheel, but it's just forces the deck forward in this really fast and turbo game plan. And I think this is where it really differs from Blue Farm, is that it's just go, go, go until some payoff gets through, right? Because you got to counter all the payoffs until you're just out of juice to counter payoffs.
Yeah, I have personally come to refer to it as just a bag of hammers, and All you're looking to do is throw the next hammer into play and see like, oh, does wheel resolve? Nope. I guess I'll try this ad nod. Does that resolve? Nope. Guess I'll get a necro. Oh, all of that fails. I'll guess like gas back up with another draw 7. Like the deck is just full gas all the time.
Yeah, it's definitely ridiculous.
I think there is this common misconception where like if you just stop it in the first 2 turns like a Cody deck, then you don't have to worry about it anymore. And that certainly is not the case. Like this deck will find a way to punch through and it will keep finding them if it's just left unchecked at all. Like it is a constant threat throughout the game.
Yeah, one thing I hate about Grixis piles isn't like the compact win cons or whatever. It's that on top of getting to be fast and everything, they just fall back on a Ristic Study that they can tutor up, or a Mystic Remore, and it's free. It's literally free. It costs them nothing to do it.
The classic Grixis core.
Grixis core.
Yeah, Grixis core turns out it's like the best thing you could be doing in cEDH right now.
And I don't want to say on the flip side, but a little farther from that, you have Blue Farm. And what does Blue Farm mean to you guys at the moment?
Yeah, mid-range dot deck. It's probably the most adaptable deck in cEDH right now. As we mentioned earlier, it can win turn 2 pretty consistently. I mean, any deck that runs Naws and Rituals can present a turn 2 win. But Blue Farm is also one of those decks that just draws an insane amount of cards, and the command zone is full of gas. Because even if your Adnaz gets stopped, you can still take that mana accelerant and pump it into a Crom, and then get your Timna out, and you're just drawing so many cards. I believe the math on it is that Crom can draw 12 cards a rotation at an absolute maximum, and that's really good. I mean, most of the time you'll probably not be drawing 12 cards, you'll draw like 4 or 5, but that's also pretty insane for just a 5 CMC creature in the command zone.
Yeah, I've been told.
Yeah, generally when I think of farm decks, the iconic deck is obviously Brew Farm, but really I always look to the commanders first, as that's sort of where the nature of the farm comes from. I always think of it's got to have either Crom or Timna usually, preferably both in this case. But the point is you're a deck that is focused on getting to ad nauseum, but you always have this constant threat of falling back on some of the most powerful commanders ever printed when it comes to card advantage, and just being able to grind and farm these resources until it is that time to push through with that Adnaz or that game-winning spell.
So, yeah, I've been told that Adnaz was a turbo deck at one point, and I just completely disagree with that now, because it's not looking to just be the turbo deck. It's looking to go mid-range, but have the possibility to just have explosive starts. And another special thing about Blue Farm, I'm going to make the comparison to Teamer because that's all I can ever do. Teamer is one of those decks that's like in the place of you need card draw in the deck to make it work. So you have to dedicate like 8 to 10 or 11 slots to just card draw. So you have an engine and advantage going. Timna Crom gets to just do that in the command zone in 2 cards that don't even go into the deck. So they have these extra slots to just put in win cons, interaction, payoffs, and it really allows you to utilize more these extra, quote unquote, extra spaces to just be more mid-rangey.
Yeah, you don't have to run an Orin Frostfang in your deck to draw cards. You can just play your Timna or your Crom and be happy about it.
Yeah.
And then the only ones that you are stuck running are still just the best ones in the format. Like there's no reason to cut Mystic Remore or Mystic Study, Esper Sentinel. You just get to have those on top of your intrinsic card advantage in the command zone.
For sure.
Well, and speaking of Esper Sentinel and Ranger Captain, I mean, that's the big difference between RogSi and Blue Farm, right? Is it's the white cards. And highlighting just those white cards there, Ranger Captain, Esper Sentinel, those are some of the best cards in the format.
Yeah.
And then the other white cards that Blue Farm also gets to run, we gets like Savine's Reclamation, Silence, Swords to Plowshares, Grand Abolisher, Lavinia, I believe.
Draneth Magistrate.
Oh, Draneth is also another big one. And Enlightened Tutor as well. But like these are all really powerful white cards, and I'll make the argument that white is actually a really good color in cEDH, but only if you're playing those like top 8 or top 9 cards. And so that's what Blue Farm does, is it replaces the most ridiculous like Rog-rak gas. Right? It replaces that Mox Amber with this Ranger Captain, and that compare Mox Amber to Ranger Captain. You have mana turn 1, and then you have Silence on a Stick that also fetches card draw.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not to mention how you can use Ranger Captain proactively and reactively, and it fits very nicely into this very adaptive mid-range shell that does whatever you need it to do.
Yeah.
It's the perfect card for any mid-range deck.
Yeah, there's been a
I'd
lot of
make
talk.
the argument that Ranger Captain is the perfect card in cEDH. But
Yeah, I was about to say there's been a lot of talk that I've seen that people have been talking about Ranger Captain and how it's not the game-winning card, but if you have one out, the chances of you winning the game just go up so much higher than before because of the way you're able to use it proactive and reactively.
I definitely think it is one of the most defining prints we've had in the past year. It has very much warped the format and has really put white as one of the colors that you want in your color identity for your deck.
Yeah, that and Esper
Like, it is
Sentinel,
a
those
reason
two
to
together
run white.
really kind of just hammered home white in a lot of the top tier decks, I think.
Yeah, Charles was right all along. White is the best color.
Okay, that's mono white though. I don't know about that one.
I mean, but it's better than green, and I think we can all agree that white is a stronger color in cEDH than green.
The skill gap.
I will not confirm. It hurts too much to say that.
No, the skill gap between casual green and cEDH green is just too large, I think. I'm waiting for my green Esper Sentinel.
Yeah. Allosaurus Shepherd, I think, is the closest comparison you're going to get.
Allosaurus Shepherd's pretty good. 2-mana Crater Hoof might make the cut.
Oh, yeah. All right, but back to Blue Farm, because that's what we're here to talk about. We're talking about Blue Farm, comparing it to RogSi. The decks are insanely powerful. But, like, why would you play one over the other, right? Like, so what benefits does RogSi have over Blue Farm?
RogSi, I think, is the fastest deck in the format that doesn't sacrifice on consistency or resiliency. Something like a Cody or a Godo, they kind of have their one shot, and skilled pilots will be able to like try and thread that needle. They are the fastest, but if they miss that line, if they're answered, if the pod is very heads up about what they're trying to do and mulligans aggressively and plays well with their seat and their pod composition, those decks don't really stand that much of a chance, especially when you're looking to enter into like a tournament setting where you need consistent results. That is the key here. Rog-rak Silas is consistently going to be able to power through more than any other turbo strategy.
Well, let me ask you this then. What do you think is the better tournament cEDH deck?
Blue Farm, not close. I would say Blue Farm's ability to pivot is really what you want when you're sitting down having to play 7+ games of cEDH. And the format itself has so much variance into it that if you want to give yourself the best chance, you want a consistent deck that is able to do well in any type of pod and play the role in the seat that it is assigned. And I think Blue Farm does that better than RogSi.
I love to play in these tournaments, and I think when you play with a play group, it doesn't matter what your play group is, right? You have some sort of preconceived notion of what everyone's playing and that everyone's a good player and everyone is going to attempt to, or like have similar play patterns that you played against before. But then you go into this open meta with your deck and this guy's running, I don't know, mono blue something that doesn't ever come up ever. Like you have to read the commander, right? So
what is the list?
Or Hazon, Shaper of
Hazazon. Yeah, Hazazon is all of a sudden at the top tables with 38 lands, and you're like, what? I don't know what to do here.
When you don't know at all, I think it's super awesome to have a deck that is able to do kind of everything. Whereas RogSi, the mono blue deck, Nezahal will just be like, I gotta stop this guy, and then you get stopped, but then like you're out at that point. There is no pivot. You have to hope to draw more gas or something like that. But with Blue Farm, you can just be like, all right, there's Timna, go again.
The way that Blue Farm is constructed, it has an answer for everything, and it has enough card advantage to find it. If the board is getting gummed up, you have that one of Fiery Covenant or that one of Toxic Deluge or that one of Cyclonic Rift to really reset the board and reset the game. Counter spells will always be a universal answer to different things. You have access to spot removal in games where there are these like critical creatures that need to be removed or these vital stacks pieces. You have access to massive amounts of card advantage. You even have access to things like Sarah's Ascendant, and Crom itself is just a massive threat and ends games when you need it to. Being able to pressure life totals meaningfully is huge in these settings where you have the best players in the room sitting there not wanting to go for it, knowing that they're going to be stopped, and you need to pressure them and force them into taking actions and actually get the game over.
Yeah, I think in recent memory I've lost more games to Crom beats than I have to Thassa's Oracle. And Crom just ends games, especially as they go longer.
Yeah, Crom threat is a real threat.
Yeah, as a big fan of Tevesh, Crom is probably the card I want to see the least sitting across from me, with just its ability to knock Crom out in one or knock Tevesh out in a turn or two. Like the pressure is just unreal that card provides. I have no idea why it had to have haste.
It did
Yeah,
not.
that was
It didn't
beyond
need
me.
it didn't need
Already
either
so good.
flying, haste, or to be a 4/4. It didn't need one of
I
those
guess they
things.
gave it red, or in order to make it red, they had to give it haste because they needed a red only ability, or else it could have just been mono blue.
Could you just imagine a 2-mana 1/3 Crom with an activated ability? Ugh, that'd be so
Gross,
good.
gross. Oh,
Yeah, you mentioned Toxic Deluge, and I know this isn't really part of the decks, but a lot of Grixis players I've been talking to have been putting Toxic Deluge back into their decks, including their RogSi decks, and I think that is absolutely hilarious based on the full circle that the format has been taking since I started playing. Right before it was, okay, there's no creatures, you're all good. Okay, wait, now there's creatures, Ragavan is worthless garbage. Okay, and now we're back on getting rid of those creatures with the Deluge because it just resets everything, and I'm like, okay.
It's because those decks are built to they're built to be flexible. They're built to win quickly, right? So the interaction that they pack, they have 2 instances that like deal with creatures on the stack, and it's Pact Negation and Force of Will, right? And so
Yeah.
if someone drops like a Notion Thief on you, right, your answers are Pact Negation, Force of Will, or one of like 4 creature removal spells in that deck.
Crom beats.
Right. Crom beats eventually. But
yeah, player removal is permanent removal, Greg.
True. But back to the point is that like these decks have a really hard time interacting with creatures, and so they're getting back on board wipes because there are Thrasios X mid-range piles that will just sit there and flash out some nasty boys, or just pile up a couple creatures and a couple value effects, and then all of a sudden the from command zone advantage engines of Tymna and Crom are only barely able to keep up with what these value decks can just spit out into play. And you need to have a way to keep those decks in check, and Toxic Deluge is the perfect way to do that.
Even looking towards the mirror, you have the person playing Blue Farm in seat 1 sneaks in that turn 1 Drannith, that turn 1 Dothy, and that asymmetrical stacks creature is fundamentally warping their ability to play the game effectively and go for their wins. Not to mention all of the other advantage that is being built up around it and locking them out of their own card advantage. And like having 1 out versus having 2 outs is significant in a deck of 100 singleton cards. Like you are doubling your odds of drawing into what you need. And for decks that are seeing so many cards in a game with their commanders, with Mystic Ristic, with Wheels, just that extra card means a significant chance that you see that one card or that one type of effect that you need to win the game and push through.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair.
Yeah, I would totally agree with
Not that I want to get deluged, but I think it is probably a good idea. There's far too many games I sneak away because everyone gets counterspelled on the stack, and I'm just like, okay, my turn.
I think it really says something about what direction Blue Farm is going in when it can get away with running Drannith Magistrate. And it tells you a lot about how powerful that card is, and also like the deck is really flexible. I mean, it can keep a 7 that spits out a turn 1 Nas, but it could also keep a 7 that just puts out a turn 1 Drannith, and then, like, those are totally different, like, opening hands. Those are totally different play styles, but somehow Blue Farm is able to just take the right ratios of everything and just creates this pile that it draws cards, it wins the game a lot. Blue Farm is just a really solid deck, honestly.
Yeah, I really did enjoy listening to Brian Koval's explanation of some of the thought processes he and Matt Sperling
Oh
went
yeah, yeah.
into for like their deck selection and how they approach playing their games. And it's we are building to raise the floor of the deck as much as possible, and their skill is so high that their thought process going into games is the more draw steps I see, the higher my chance of winning the game is. Because I, as the better player with the better pile of cards, like these are objectively just the most powerful cards in the format, I have more opportunities to get the most powerful cards, the most powerful resources, and actually put them into play and get their effect. And that's going to give me the highest likelihood of winning the
Well,
game.
Zach, I
And
could
that's
have told you
how I
that.
personally have. That's how I have seen Blue Farm quite a bit. I've seen some people argue more that it's more turbo. I think that's just approaching the deck in the wrong way. Like there are better decks to do that. I wouldn't try and take some shell that is better suited for something else and try and make it do something that's already been done better.
When I was if I had to restart it all over again and I'm a new player, I would want someone to just hand me the pile that is Blue Farm and then just say good luck. That's all I want. I think that is the perfect way to learn because it just does everything so well, and there's like you're allowed to have a couple flex slots that everyone's gonna tell you not to run, but it doesn't matter because it's Blue Farm.
Yeah, the fact that you run Lavinia over the Dispel or
God, I hate
the Spell
Lavinia.
Pierce, like you're arguing of like fractions of a percentage point, and it doesn't matter. And when you get to play those cards, you're gonna feel super smart because it's like my one decision that I put into this incredibly unoriginal deck got there. Like it was me. I'm the smart one.
Yeah, my mom just
Yeah.
built a Blue Farm deck, and it's actually better than your Blue Farm deck.
Yeah. Every day I look at Blue Farm and it's like, damn, I wish Curious Control could have white in it instead of green. Like I would do anything to have just a sans green Curious Control. Thrasios File Smasher with all those fun white cards.
See, I approach this problem in the opposite way, playing Timna Thrasios. I just wish that they banned Dockside so I don't feel so bad for not running red cards.
No,
Yeah.
no, Dockside's fine.
Let me play green. I don't want to have to play red.
I like red. I like red and green.
No,
Honestly, all the
green's
colors Magic are pretty
green's
fun.
due for a really good reprint. It's been a while.
Yeah, green needs some help right
Or a
now.
reprint of it's a new card. I did not mean reprint. It just needs something better. It needs something really good to come out right now.
Right now. So, all right, RogSi. So we looked at Blue Farm as this really nice, really mid-range deck. It draws a lot of cards, it wins a lot of games, it does everything we want it to do. But RogSi, right? Why play RogSi over something like a Tevish Crom? Because Tevish Crom is another Grixis pile. It's a Grixis core, but it takes the Blue Farm approach of having like card draw and like technical win cons in the command zone, because you can actually do Hullbreaker horror things with Tevish and draw your deck out that way. But I don't know, because I lean towards Tevish Crom if I'm looking for a fast Grixis pile, because I'd rather. I mean, it's my bias coming through, but I'd rather play the hunkier card draw and the hunkier advantage engines than risk it all on here's my Rog-rak land Springleaf Drum, pass the turn, and hope I can untap and Nas.
Yeah, here's right back to the thing that I was complaining about basically is that they just get to be all in, right? RogSi just gets to be all in and then just play a Heuristic Study, right? Like what the they can't. But if you're playing like Rog Tevesh or Krom Tevesh, or Krom Tevesh I guess does get the Heuristic Study, but they don't get the Rog. And what's so
Yeah.
special about Rog, like I said, is just It's the extra mana. It's the ability to just go off of literally nothing. I just watched Play to Win's video, and they actually had Brian on playing RogSi, and turn 2, he was like a wheel and the Nas deep and a defense grid out, fighting through interaction, like all these things into a turn 2 win off of literally no board state. And the fact that you can just do that because you have a 0-drop creature in your command zone to just enable all these few extra cards is ridiculous.
But like the few extra cards are like Infernal Plunge, Culling Ritual, Mox Amber.
It's
But those are
the
the
weak.
ones.
Yeah.
Culling the Weak.
I don't
excuse me,
even think
yeah.
they're on Infernal Plunge anymore.
No, I don't
They got
think
off
so.
Infernal Plunge. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, I don't know. I think those cards are all pretty decent, but you can play all of those cards in a blue farm deck still.
Yeah, but they're not
I mean,
free.
they're
So
not
the
out
way
of the
that
command zone, but
Yeah, the way that I've come to think of it is when I think back to playing 60 card formats, one of people's favorite cards in Eternal formats like Modern and Legacy, Thoughtseize. Everyone loves Thoughtseize. And one of the common play patterns or like the common stories around that card is you Thoughtseize the card out of their hand, and then the next card they draw is the card that you just Thoughtseized. And the common phrase is you can't Thoughtseize the top of the deck. And when I think to RogSi, I think, yes, maybe I've dealt with their hand currently, but the sheer density of just incredible threats that that deck has is so high that they're just going to find the next one. They don't need that card advantage because their deck is so full of them and full of tutors to find them. And they still do have those other additional pieces of card advantage like Mystic and Ristic.
It's funny because that's all you need. That's literally all
Yes.
you need.
You have how many tutors? You have 3 draw 7s. You have an Adnos. You have Bolus's Citadel. You have Necropotence. Like, one of these things you're going to be able to shove through. And some of these things, like the wheels in particular, they have this more political aspect to them where someone has that Ristic going that you just fed playing out your 6 rocks from your 7 card hand, and you're like, wow, they're on 12 cards, guys. We need to let this wheel resolve to reset the board because we all need to reset and get back to 7. And I have definitely let those wheels or like tried to help those wheels push through because someone else was sitting on that Ristic and was at 12 cards and I was at 2. And I'm like, this benefits me. I know it benefits them a lot, but in order to advance my game state, I am behooved as well to get this through.
yeah, that makes sense. But
Yeah.
I just want to point out something. So you said that like RogSi runs an overwhelmingly more amount of like win cons and stuff. But when we're just looking at the two lists we mentioned earlier, the only like win con difference between the two, or like payoff difference, it's Bolas's Citadel, Necropotence, and Wheel of Misfortune are like the 3 like explosive advantage engines, right? And because we are just looking at 2 particular people's lists,
who, for all intents and purposes, they work very closely together. Like,
yeah,
they run a podcast together. They play in the same
Oh,
Discords. Like, they work
nothing
together.
against these people. Like these guys are really smart, but I've seen Blue Farm lists play like Bolas's Citadel. I've seen them play Necropotence. I've seen them play with Misfortune, and they work just fine, right? So, is that comparison of win cons? Are we applying that just to these 2 lists?
Okay.
Because
So the thing.
No, it's the combination of both points here. You have that extra bit of fast mana to power out these win cons, and you still have that density of win cons. So like it's kind of like the three pieces of the triangle here. You can have all of these like incredibly like weird costed things like the Moonsnare prototypes, the Phyrexian towers. Like you can take advantage of those with Rog-rak. You can have the default card advantage in the command zone with Timna or Crom or Tevesh, or you could have this high density of win conditions with your extra turns, with like Final Fortune and all of those effects, your redundant copy of Wheels, your Adnos, your Bulls, Citadel, your Necro. There's only 100 slots in this deck, and you're still going to have to jam in your Dockside, your Breach, or your like 13 counter spells, all of your 15 mana rocks, and your Wishclaw Talisman, your 24 to 28 lands. Like you still have to find the room for this. So it's just a matter of preference at this point and what you're expecting to face. Do I want to have that consistent fast mana and that density at the cost of my card advantage, or am I getting rid of some of that fast mana in those like commander synergistic cards to have these fallback plan and be maybe a turn to half a turn slower?
I want to point out that 3 extra win conny payoff cards is not a small amount of extra cards. I mean, like when you've added everything, like Zach said, you are really left with that extra like chunk of cards you have to run or you need to run, and putting 3 more payoffs in there is, I think, pretty huge. Especially when you are looking to just get to it so fast, faster than Blue Farm is really trying to get to it, right? Because we talked about how Rog is trying to go a little bit faster than Blue Farm. So when you're trying to just get to one faster, the better chance you have of drawing it off the top is just overall better for you in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've seen Connor play the deck quite a bit, and I think more often than not, he doesn't go for the Adnos. He's like, I'm just going to mulligan until I wheel, because I'm going to put 3 mana or 4 mana into play and just cast a wheel, and I'm still going to be ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just
That's-
what the deck wants to do.
It's one of the few situations where wheels are really good is when you're going first and you can jam the turn 1 wheel, and then it's like, hey, look, guys, I'm untapping turn 2 with 7 cards and 4 mana. This is really great. Or 3 mana. This is really great.
I don't think people get punished enough, though, because people are still in third seat casting their wheel. Like, they do not care.
People need Hull Breacher to come back for just 1 weekend.
I've been waiting for the 1
No,
mana Hull
no.
Breacher to come back, okay?
God, no.
I'd
but
love
yeah.
to play in the Hull Breacher legal event.
There needs to
Ugh.
be green.
my
Okay,
boy.
green needs to be the color that gets some sort of punishment for card advantage. Because right now we can see that clearly the best decks are just all they are is card advantage and payoffs of card advantage.
Green needs something from the Hull Breacher opposition agent cycle. I'm thinking like a 3 mana elf druid with flash, and whenever an opponent activates the ability of an artifact,
draw a card.
Like,
That's a good one.
It's like you like make a treasure token, and then they counter that ability of the artifact unless they pay 1 or something like stupidly powerful. So it just
This has nothing to do with green.
obliterates treasures.
This is just a white card. This is just a white card that
I'm
you're
with Greg
describing
on
that you're
this
hoping
one.
to
I
color
think we
shift
should.
to
I think
green.
this should be printed.
Yeah.
Thank God that neither of you work for Wizards.
The format would be healed, I think.
I think if I worked for Wizards, all I'd do is make 2 more curiosities in black and red and then quit.
No, your
Show
goal
up on day 1, I'd print these cards, and 2 copies in existence, I'd leave.
Oh my God.
The only curious control player would be great.
Greg has made the most banned cards in the history of Magic.
Probably. Follow me on Twitter if you want more terrible Magic card takes, by the way.
Oh God.
Yeah. Man, RogSi, Blue Farm, what crazy decks. We can edit this entire section out in post, so
perfect. But yeah, I would say as Blue Farm is built to raise the floor of the deck, I would say that RogSi is built to have a maximized potential of those crazy, insane starts where you're just going like Cryptland Wheel if I'm mulliganing to 3. Like, it's designed to just go until it hits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I see it every single time I play against it. Without fail, the deck just doesn't. There's no game that the deck sits there and does literally nothing. Like, sometimes you'll be on a bad mulligan or whatever in another deck, and it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to do anything this game. But RogSi never has nothing. Because it can go mulligan down to 3 cards and have something.
All the credit to Brian Cook for really pushing and trying to innovate on this deck. And I see a lot of the way that he approaches the Epic Storm in Legacy, and he brings that same sort of philosophy to his building in cEDH, where everything is calculated. He records all of his games. He's taking notes. He's trying to do stats. He's trying to figure out, like, mathematically, this last chance, if I cast it here, I'm like 70% to hit. I'm just going to do it. That 30% is going to feel bad, but I don't think it's the wrong decision. And statistically, it works. So I think a lot of, like, if you aren't the type of person that can lean into that and just being like, I don't have it now, but the chances are good that this last chance gets me there, I'm just going to run it. Like, if you cannot do that, this is not the deck for you.
I
Go back to Blue Farm, be a little bit safer.
go
Just play
back
the
to Blue
Timna out,
Farm.
tutor for that Flusterstorm, do whatever you got to do to survive, and wait for that more deterministic win.
Oh, 100%. I listened to a podcast with Brian in it, and he brought up a point that I really loved just from a brewer's perspective. It's that you just need to kind of question everything. And if you question enough things and question the right things, you'll kind of find the weak spots of any deck or playstyle or whatever it may be, because obviously he came into cEDH right recently, and I'm sure we could all relate to this in some level. He comes into this deck, the deck's already made by someone else, and then you question everything about it and play it and see the flaws and then make changes. And that's just what he did with RogSi and uh, the other, what was his name? The guy, the Blue Farm guy.
Matt Sperling
Yes, that's like,
and Brian Koval.
yeah, Koval. That's just what they did to these decks, which is really cool because that's all just brewing is. And now it's even a few months ago, you wouldn't even think about all these things, but now it's like just common knowledge and the considered the right thing to do when playing these decks.
Yeah, and you and Jack had a very similar approach to Animar, where you cut basically all of these rules that were decided about the deck, and you just said, I'm going to try it, I'm going to find my own results, and I'm going to use the information that I gain to try and build this deck and push it in the direction that I think it needs to go.
Yeah.
And granted, Animar is not in the same world as Blue Farm
Yeah.
or
Oh, absolutely
RogSi.
not.
We don't need to talk about that.
But you have still pushed that deck way further than it ever would have if you had just stuck with those same rules as before.
Yeah, and it's really cool talking with you guys too, and just everyone in our group. It's all when you talk to more brewers like this, you get so much more out of the game and the format and just Magic as a hobby as a whole, which is what I think is really cool. And that's just what these guys did with these decks and have just found the best thing to be doing right now.
And you don't always have to agree on these things. Like, I can talk to Connor, who is Grixis Shell. I'm just going to play the best Adnaz deck I can find. I still have never won a game after resolving an Adnaz. I just don't know how that card functions. We're going to have some conflicting views on the format and what we think is best.
Of course.
And we're all going to have our own biases, but we're still able to push each other and find different cards and different options. And ultimately, we are better brewers for it.
Oh yeah, if there's no difference in opinions, then nothing ever changes and nothing ultimately improves. So actually, I think it's really important to have the varying differences. And I know Greg is no stranger to differences with everyone else in the room. But
Yeah, there's some wild takes about how cEDH should be looked at and played.
and that's fine. If you weren't here, then no one would have that, and we wouldn't have something else to work with.
Yeah,
And
I
it
think
goes
Drake
for-
is another brewer I just wanted to shout out real quick for also coming into the scene, having a bunch of takes that really a big majority of the community did not align on, and they had no problems letting him know that. And he has stuck to his results, his findings, and I think he was a very strong player, a very strong brewer, and his results really
A
show.
thought I've had recently is that I actually have a lot of respect for Greg in this regard because obviously he's on a lot of podcasts, whatever. I just listen to it, whatever, in my free time. But he is always bombarded. He's always bombarded with whatever he thinks, and no matter what people tell him to do or tell him is good or bad, he always just does what he wants to do. He's like, yeah, man, I just think it's cool. I'm gonna do this, and he just sticks with it. All right, no hard feelings, no nothing, and I have a lot of respect for that.
Fast forward a couple months, and now Niv Mizzet is being played in basically every blue-red mid-range deck that I've seen in the wild.
Hey, I'm about to run with Mizzet, okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we are all playing EDH. There is still some level of self-expression and getting to play these sweet cards that we otherwise don't get to play. And if I wanted to play like stock 60 card formats with zero innovation and just sit there and kind of grind through matches and not really enjoy it, I would play other formats. That's not what cEDH
and that's just the
is
reality.
or
Yeah.
needs to be.
Well, it's like if I wanted to play like the objective best deck, I would play the objective best deck, but I just want to play what I like pushed to its absolute limit because that's how I view cEDH. I mean, I will still always live by the opinion that the fastest Grixis Turbonauz list, right? If it ever makes it to turn 5 somehow against basically any list off of EDH Rec, right? I think the EDH rec list has a higher chance of winning the game because it just plays some stupid 4-drop. And it's like, what is the cEDH deck going to do? I don't know if anyone has tried this, but take your like Grixis Nas pile, go to your local meta, and play games with just people rocking like high power decks, right?
I
You'll
think
win your turn 1, turn 2 Nas games, right? But if you ever have a mid hand where someone stops you once or twice, right, you have no grind potential in the late game because all these other decks. This is how like I like to play Control. You just get so much advantage, right? And you blink and you look at it, and these decks have 15 cards in hand, and it's like, what the hell happened? Yeah, I mean,
there's
CDH
definitely
decks are
going to
built
be
fast,
there's
but
there's definitely going to be a parasitic nature to the upper echelons of these Grictish shells that are relying so heavily on Mystic, Rhystic, Dockside. Like,
Mhm.
if people aren't casting 5 non-creature spells in a turn or like pumping out mana rocks, like Dockside making 2 or 3 mana is pretty pitiful. Like,
Yeah.
whenever we play against Connor and we have like these weird like Animar, Curious Control, and a Shia piles, he's like, why the hell does my Dockside only make 3 mana? This ain't cEDH. What are you assholes doing?
Oh, that's
They're
my favorite
like,
take. This
no.
is
Exactly.
cEDH.
But if everyone's playing those Grixis piles, right, it's like turn 2, that Dockside makes like 14, right? But the second you start to play outside of a curated group like that and you play with more random decks, these really tuned lists start to fall apart because their cards aren't as reliable.
This is reflected in any tournament, I think, that isn't proxy friendly. I know they're all pretty much proxy friendly now, but there was the Cash Cards Unlimited tournament. If you look
Yep.
at the decks that made top 16 in that tournament, you would never expect them to be top 16 in any tournament, cEDH tournament, literally ever.
But all
But
goofy high power decks.
yeah, which is fine because that's just what cEDH is, and all of these highly tuned, real, right, fully non-proxy decks just weren't equipped to handle these 8/8 beater creatures.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, getting flipping into play dollar rares is definitely
That'll get there.
It'll get there.
It's a wild time. I know that on Twitter today, Drake and I were having a brief conversation on the power level of partners in cEDH, and how partners currently with Timna Crom just like being the best of the best out there. There's like not much reason to play anything else, and Wizards has said that they won't print partners at the Timna and Crom power level ever again. But like
God.
the only real way to like fix the partner problem is either ban all of the C16 partners or print more of them to dilute the pool, which is my own personal hot take, I think. But
no, I think partners.
If
is
you
the
want to
worst thing
nerf
ever happen
Timna,
to
you got to
CEDH.
print like 40 more Timnas.
So, looking at the top 16 of Okotober, I think all but trying to think back, I think maybe one deck didn't have partner in the command zone, or even like that's what is it? The blue the choose a background that's kind of like partner.
Oh,
Or the
Mhm.
partners with like
Candlekeep, right?
there was 2 permanents in the command zone in I think 15 out of 16 decks or something ridiculous.
It's insane.
CEDH is broken. Fix it. Ban
But again,
partners.
it's the extra card thing too, right? Like
Yeah, if you look back to the old companion rule, you intrinsically start the game with an extra card. That's absurd. There's a reason why, like, when you mulligan and you go down a card, it feels bad. Starting the game at +1 card feels really good. When those cards are Timna, Crom, Thrasios, it feels even better. Those are
Rog-rak.
ridiculously powerful commanders. They are generic card advantage. In the case of Thrasios, it's a win con in and of itself for infinite mana. Timna is one of the best draw engines in the format. Crom is just an absolute house and pressures life totals, protects your life totals, also is an insane card advantage. Like, these are A tier commanders. And the fact that you get to play 2 of them and start with that extra card in the command zone is just absurd. Like, I don't think the partner mechanic is inherently problematic. We see like okay powered cards like Tavesh and Malcolm are very cool cards. They reward a specific type of deck building and building around. So we see that powerful monocolored cards and partner work. We also see cards like no one is really saying Tana or Bruce Tarl needs to be banned, those are two colored commanders. Nobody is saying that Ludovic's or what is the other blue red partner?
It's Ludovic. Hello, Google. What are you looking at?
Yeah, exactly. We don't even know the name of it. It doesn't need to be banned. So, like, two colored partners, again, aren't necessarily the problem. It is
Ludovic.
these hyper efficient generic cards advantage engines that are giving you access to these absurd 4-color piles.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
here's actually a fun little quiz. There are two different printings of Ludwig, one in Midnight Hunt, I believe, and one from C16. Can you identify the C16? There's Ludwig Necrogenius and Ludwig Necro-Alchemist.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Let's see.
They were both
Huh?
printed when I was when I came
I'm
in.
gonna go with Necro Alchemist is the
Yeah,
C16 one.
That's the C16 one, which is
Ooh.
it was a
Good
coin
job.
flip, but Necro Genius, Necro Alchemist. But it's like
You could have lied and told me otherwise, and I would not have been able to know.
should have made up a third option. I just thought that was really funny, right? Because the only partners that really see a ton of play are like Thrasios, Tim, Necrom, right? You see Tana when you're doing Blood Farm or Blood Pod.
Tana is just there for colors. Tana is it's paired with Malcolm, it's paired with Timna, it's not there for anything else. You will occasionally see the weird Tevesh pile. I don't care. That could stay. That's cool. That's fine. Tana is just there for colors.
That's what I'm saying. Is like there's like 3 like really good C16 partners, and then everything else is pretty mid.
So now that we've identified that partners are broken in cEDH, who would have thought? I want to move into our community question here, which is actually a really, really good question. So Bosch and Roll, who just did the Okotoberfest review, it was the same guy who had the winning deck, right? I believe. Yeah, he just did a video and he said that he believes that politics in tournaments will die out as the format grows because the likelihood of playing against familiar players will drop. So what do you guys think about that?
So as someone who is pretty good at politicking people in cEDH and who plays with the same group of people over and over and over and over again, you guys fall for the same tricks over and over and over and over again, right? Like you'll catch on and you'll be like, oh, that was really cool. Like I'm never going to fall for that again, right? And then like the next week, I'll just change how I worded it and you'll fall for the exact same thing. People who are really good at politics at a cEDH table will always be good at politics for a cEDH table. Politics and the effectiveness of politics might die out as people get better. But it's not because you're playing against familiar faces. It's just because the people you're playing against are also building up that political skill.
I think even as someone like Mike, Sad Robot, is also renowned for his politicking ability. He has that reputation. So the more that reputation becomes prevalent in the community and in a tournament setting, people might catch on and might be a little more cautious of what he says. But I don't think it's going to go away completely. I think the effectiveness that it might have for certain individuals or like how prevalent it shows up in a different game might wax and wane a bit. But there's no shot that it goes away completely. I think it's just like the human aspect of this game. Like people talk during a game, it's going to happen.
You could never have a politic-free game of cEDH, right? Because of how priority works, right? I mean, it's not just a 1v1. You have to deal with 2 additional opponents. And so determining who answers what, that's a conversation by itself. I mean, you can just play with no outside talk. You just like pass priority, I have an answer, pass priority or whatever. But like people don't play like that. I don't think I've ever played a game where like there's an Adnaz on the stack and everyone's like pass priority, counterspell, right? It's an Adnaz. People like talking. It's a social game at its core. People will chat like, what's the best way to deal with this threat on the stack? Politics is never going away.
I do count all of like the cooperation and coordination and that sort of like 3v1 aspect that comes out of a multiplayer game. I lump all of that in under politicking. You have someone like Ken Bauman that really tries to push the political aspect of the game, and we look back to what was the world's championship event that he won
Do not ask me that
over
question because I do
over
not have
in
an answer.
I feel
over
like
in
a
Europe?
terrible friend for Ken. Oh no.
Whatever the name of the
Yeah,
event was.
the international one where he won the time twister.
Tier 1 con. I
There you
got
go.
there.
We
Yeah.
knew it.
Where there was the issue where all of the players in like the middle of like a game ending stack were like, yeah, I agree to draw. And he's like really pushing like, you guys, like there's a huge opportunity for politicking here and like trying to finagle a way out. And he made like these proposals of like, you give me 3 turns of not attacking me. Like that is the huge hyper extreme of politicking that I definitely see less commonly. And there are definitely like more players that are adverse to that level of like deal making and politicking, especially as you get into the grounds of like, at what point is like lying acceptable? Do you lie for like a $4,000 prize pool? Do you lie for the time twister?
Yeah.
Some player like,
Yeah.
hell yeah, I'm lying for that time twister.
So
Someone who's better off or maybe just doesn't care about that aspect of the game, they'll stick to their word.
my
Like
I'd lie
that
for a
part
time
is going to
twister.
be.
I
I'll
would
put that on record. I'd lie for a time twister. I'd probably lie for a bayou, to be honest.
So my personal thoughts on this is the exact statement he put out was the more people in the format, or the more the format grows, politics drop because you're not playing against people you know, right? I think this is, out of a personal experience, the complete wrong take because I walk into tournaments like I play Animar, right? It's not the best deck out there, but I don't consider myself to be a bad pilot. I walk out of tournaments with like 50% win rates at least, right? I went into Chaos was the most recent one I did, and I straight up just completely lied to to this guy that I wasn't gonna, or had nothing going on, right? I played my cards and was like, man, I just don't think I have anything going on here. I'm gonna pass the turn. But I had survival of the fittest out. And they're like, can you do anything? I'm like, no, 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 I don't think I'm gonna do anything on my turn. And then immediately I'm like, oh, I don't have any creatures. I can't survival right now. And you just completely just play them into just giving yourself a wide opening, right? I don't know these people, so it's so much easier to kind of manipulate them, which is kind of bad. I mean, it's a tournament setting, so like I don't feel bad about it, whatever. But if I'm playing against you guys or my friends or Jack or whatever, and I try to do that, they are like, "Come on, are you serious right now?" Like that, we know you're lying to us. We know you have something going on. You don't just have nothing going on. And
Yeah, in the most competitive settings, there are so many little facets to the game that are left on the table.
mhm,
How long are they taking to decide on their mulligan? How long are they pondering on a decision of whether or not to respond to the stack? You look even as far as doing like things like the pen trick from competitive Magic, where somebody makes or like they're trying to decide attacks, and you pick up a pen to like write down that your life totals are about to change, and then you just blow them out with some combat trick. Like all of these things are still present, and the fact that you have more players in the game that are able to like buy into this and that you had basically more targets for these kinds of things, like it's only going to increase in prevalence.
oh, 100%. I think that there's no way to remove politics from the game. I don't think that there's in any way that the politics die out of the game. And there's definitely no chance that if you're someone I've never played against before in a tournament setting, that I will not try to politic you in some way, shape, or form. And I think
Yeah,
that's just
politics
true of
are essential.
every good cEDH player knows this, and that's why you keep saying. I think that this is a big reason why you keep seeing the same people make top 16 or top 20 or whatever it is. It's not necessarily the deck; it is the deck they're playing, but it's also the player, right? Like if you
Yeah.
hand me Blue Farm when I first
Mhm.
started playing, I'm not going to make top 16, but if you hand Blue Farm to I keep forgetting his name, the guy that just won, then you're gonna
Brian
win,
Koval.
It's
right? You're
Koval.
Brian
Yeah,
Koval. You're gonna win.
you have the best players in the room playing the best decks, and they're not only that, but they're optimizing their decks to beat the room. Like,
Hmm.
yes, those players more often than not are going to win the game. Yes,
Yeah.
you will have your Hazazons, the Shaper of Sands, making deep runs sometimes. Yes, Magda will spike a tournament and go undefeated. Uh,
Hate mocked.
but
Yeah.
more often than not, it is the better players playing the better decks with the higher floor will have the better potential to win tournaments, and they will do so more consistently.
I think that's
Yeah.
just a objectively correct statement. There's not really a whole lot to argue with there.
And part of being a better player is doing all of those little things like politicking, selling yourself, selling your positions, dodging threats, correctly navigating the political aspect of this game. Like it takes all facets of this game to
It
be
takes it
good,
so
and a
much
format
farther.
that has such high variance. Every edge that you can get, every fraction of percentage point will matter.
Yeah,
This
this
brings
is
up a whole nother argument, though. Like the fraction point like mattering thing. I don't know. I am against tier lists.
oh, we need to
In
do a
a,
tier list. I'm putting that on the list right
like,
now.
against tier
I'm
lists.
making a tier list of Greg's takes.
Okay.
Greg's hot takes, and I'm gonna make a tier list of them.
The great creature needs
I
to be on
don't
top.
like the competitive deck tier list saying like there's a huge difference between S tier, A tier, B tier, and like you have no shot at like doing well in a tournament off of like a B tier list. Because I don't think the win percentage. I mean, remember 25% win rate is the gold standard for just regular play, and in a tournament you need to be a lot better. You need to get like a 45 or a 50% win rate if you want to securely make top 16.
Yeah.
But if you just hand like a decent deck to any skilled pilot or like a one trick, like a guy who's played 3,000 games of Yisan, I'm way more terrified of them than I am with a guy who's played 20 games of cEDH in his life and he's picking up RogSi. And it's like, great, that Yisan player is like horrifying. Is way better at this game than you are. I don't know. I just think that tier lists kind of fall apart once you start factoring in player skill. And
we should
it's a conversation that people aren't ready to have.
No, we should do
yes,
a tier
player
list,
skill
but
matters.
tier list based on your own skill to pilot the deck.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
That's what we'll do. We'll do 3 separate tier lists, one for each player.
I think a little spoiler alert. We're doing I'm trying to find like some of the top control players, and we'll be doing a tier list based on what the top control decks are.
Is it you and your 2 clones?
It's me and Callahan and one other person.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually Greg logging into 3 separate instances of the podcast recording software.
Yeah, he records
and
1
just
hour
canceling
each of him
echo on
talking
either
to
one.
himself, so he just matches
It's
it all
the
together.
echo chamber of just like counterspells good. Yeah.
The episode would be titled Greg's Fever Dream.
Oh, that is a fantastic episode.
All right, and as we bring this show to a wrap today, where can we find you guys on social media?
Yeah, just find me on Discord at ZClan7. I'm around to talk about all things Teamer, Animar, or whatever else you want to talk about.
And I'm Zach. You can find me as Disco Breaker. Probably the easiest place to find me is look for Greg's hot takes on Twitters, and I'll probably be in the replies there making fun of them.
Yep.
That's true. And then I'm Greg, or at Curious Control on Twitter and at Curious Control everywhere else. And this was the Pass Priority Podcast. We pass priority.
We pass priority.
That's so cringe. I still
like it.
cue outro music and then just like whatever banter at the end.
I like pass priority.
Pass priority. All right, that's pretty chill. Pass priority.